Well. It's Tuesday, November 26th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm Bob Harris. This is the Audible channel. And it's time to go on the hot seat. But first, I want to wish you all happy Thanksgiving. It's holiday week. Hope everyone's doing extremely well out there. Footballguys.com is the website. I appreciate you joining me here every Tuesday at this time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And also Saturdays at 11 a.m. for my Ask Me Anything live streams. I really appreciate the attendance there. Hit the subscribe button, the notification bell. You can like us or not like us, and we're okay with that. And by we, I mean me and my fantastic guest this week. I'm really happy to have Zach Kruger on from Roto World. If you don't read all his stuff, I don't know why. It's fantastic stuff. We'll talk a little bit about what he's got going on. But Zach and I go back a little ways, and super happy to have it on. We're going to talk a little free agents tonight. Zach, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, Bob. It's great hearing your voice again. I think the last time I heard it somewhat in person, at least maybe in this context, just over the radio, was at SiriusXM when I was producing for you and Dempsey on the Football Diehards. It's honor to finally be on the other side of this with you, chatting up a little bit from a football perspective and getting into the weeds on some of these players. So I'm pumped to be here with you and have a chance to share this hour-long stretch of radio content with you.
Glad everyone come. Hello, Andrea. Hello, Royal Slade. Scampers, and great to see everyone here. We'll get to some questions here at some point. We'll talk through some free agent situations. There's a couple newsy things going on. By the way, I just Zach throw it out there. Zach mentioned, I got to know Zach as my producer at Sirius for a period of time, but since then, I've gotten to know Zach as a fantastic analyst through his work at Roto World, and in particular, the weekly article on running backs. Tell us a little bit about what you got going on there at Roto World every week.
Yeah, so the one you just referenced, I put it out every Wednesday, usually morning. It's always up before noon. It's a backfield report, which I do every week. I take a comprehensive look at every backfield that played in the previous week. So, I mean, I know we had like 6 teams on bye, so like 26-ish backfields, however many teams played this past week. I'll be looking at the snaps, the opportunities, the routes run, and the targets that every running back saw for every backfield in week 12, and then kind of just discuss how we're maybe approaching that backfield in week 13 as we prepare for the stretch run ahead of the fantasy playoffs. Obviously, there's going to be some situations like a Derrick Henry where you're probably not getting too excited about Justice Hill, but I mentioned that. And then other times there's situations where it may be a key player went down in a backfield, maybe someone like J.K. Dobbins. We're still waiting to hear about this knee injury of his. I'll touch on that. I'll let you know about the fantasy impact of that, who we might expect to see take his place if he's to miss any time, and I highlight those things as well. So the backfield report every Wednesday, and then my expected fantasy points article. Kind of confuses some people, but just the quick rundown on that is expected fantasy points is a number that we look at that basically looks at a player's opportunities that they earned in the previous week, where they earned it on the field, and how much they could have scored had everything worked out for them in a perfect fantasy environment. And I use those expected fantasy points to highlight some players who maybe saw some volume that we weren't aware of because maybe they didn't produce well in a given week, or maybe they surprised and had an outburst. Someone like Luke Schoonmaker the other week for the Dallas Cowboys. He was one of my streaming options after a good week. So expected points on Friday. It'll be Thursday this week, but normally on Friday, and then every Wednesday the backfield report, which I think that's one that a lot of people really gravitate to.
Backfield report is appointment reading for me. I have a handful of articles I read every week. That is one of them, and it is fantastic. So before we get into the free agents, we'll talk some free agent running backs. We'll take some of your questions. We'll kick around some other things as well. I wanted to ask about a backfield that's coming up, playing Friday. The Kansas City Chiefs and the Raiders. There's 2 backfields there that are kind of interesting, but the Chiefs is the big one. What is the approach when you have a player like Isaiah Pacheco? And we're going to assume for our purposes that he is coming back, practice fully today. The expectation is that he will play. Matt Nagy talked, the offensive coordinator suggested it's going to be great to have them splitting time. What is your approach in those kind of circumstances?
So I think you have to kind of look at, what were the Chiefs doing beforehand, and also realize what Kareem Hunt actually is. Because what he is he's a veteran back who is great at handling volume, but just because he's getting all that volume doesn't necessarily mean he's efficient. Kareem Hunt was literally one of the true bell cows of the league when he took over for Pacheco in week 4, I believe it was, after the injury. He's got a 36% opportunity share. That's near the tops of any running back in the league. But then Isaiah Pacheco himself was, seeing an insane amount of work in the 2 games that he appeared in for the Chiefs as well this season. A 42% opportunity share, just insane numbers. We know he didn't have a lot of competition between Carson Steele and Samaje Perine. Perine was kind of like the one that could have threatened him. Right. And in that 2-game sample size, he just simply didn't. Now, Hunt, I think his lack of efficiency is probably going to steer him off of a lot of the early down rushing attempts. And where I'm kind of envisioning him maybe having some fantasy utility, and this is probably going to be more beneficial for half or full PPR players, is going to be in the passing game. Now, that's somewhere where Pacheco can also work. He saw 8 targets in his first 2 games, averaged 4 targets a game if you're doing the math at home. But we know that Kareem Hunt can also do that. So the question is going to kind of become, how much are the Chiefs going to use Hunt to spell Pacheco in certain downs and situations? Could he maybe see a goal line opportunity? We know Kareem Hunt has value at the goal line, but I think right now I'm probably weary of Kareem Hunt. If I have Pacheco, I'm fine with playing him this week. And then it's going to kind of be wait and see for me with Kareem Hunt, just because we need the snaps and the opportunities to be there. And then if the targets are there, we can maybe kind of PPR scam our way into a few RB3-ish, maybe an RB2 week. Even with Pacheco still in the mix.
Right. Like for me, I'm always chasing the volume. And, we know we're going to have to deal with backfields where there's a split workload, and we want to get an understanding of what that volume is going to be. I think like you think about Carolina, where we've got at some point, Jonathan Brooks is going to work his way into the mix with Chuba Hubbard. Are we expecting a radical shift in workload there? Like I think in an ideal world, like in next year world, the 2025 world, we get a Detroit Lions style backfield. Chuba Hubbard did just get paid, but for this year, do you have any expectations that Jonathan Brooks becomes anything more than Miles Sanders was?
That's a tough one, and that question was only made tougher after Brooks saw, I think, like 3 snaps in his debut. Was it not 3 snaps for Jonathan Brooks in his first? It was bad. Like not that we expected him to necessarily go out there and take over for Chuba Hubbard, but it was 3 snaps or something like that. Only 2 opportunities. I'm looking at it here, 2 carries for 7 yards. We expected more than that, I think, at least in his debut, even if he wasn't supposed to be, taking a significant chunk of the work from Hubbard.
5 snaps. 5 snaps.
There you go. 5 snaps, 2 opportunities, no targets. It's brutal. With Brooks, I do think that the Panthers are obviously going to slow play it with him and get him back into the mix. The question, I think, is kind of more so, when is that going to become something that we care about for fantasy? Obviously, this week, everyone, I think, was still starting Hubbard. No one was that worried about how things are going to look. But now, I think you at least have to be a little bit worried that what if the Panthers decide in a lost season where they still might want to get their rookie some looks, how could that maybe mix into the fantasy playoffs? Unfortunately, might be where it gets worse. If they're going to keep on increasing his workload over the course of the next several weeks, then you're maybe looking at a fantasy playoff game or two where he's finally seeing, maybe closer to like a 60-40 split. There's really no way of knowing right now what they're going to do with that. We can fall back on knowing that Hubbard did get a 4-year extension just a couple weeks ago. The Panthers are clearly committed to making him and keeping him a part of the offense. I think he's going to still be a key part through this season, but can we keep expecting those weekly RB1 weeks that seemed like they were basically locked in from the start of the season, or is it going to become more of a shift towards Brooks and Hubbard splitting more of the backfield? Week 12, looks pretty good for Hubbard, but week 13 is going to be another animal, and we got to just kind of see how that plays out.
Right. I was impressed with what he did against the Chiefs. That's 2 weeks now where we've had running backs put up decent fantasy totals against the Kansas City defense that hasn't done that. So that brings up Amir Abdullah. And by the way, Mel, Barkley helped everyone make the playoffs. Congratulations to you, Mel. Man, Barkley, the poster child for volume this year. Like, we see this every year. When we're sitting here pondering our drafts, there's one thing we should be chasing first and foremost. It's like the most certain volume you can find on fairly good players. It's a pretty simple equation. But Amir Abdullah goes into Kansas City this week. Do you trust him in this game? Or, I think we've got no teams on bye this week, so maybe you don't have to. But so you don't want to. Where's the fine line between forcing him into a lineup? Where does he rank for you this week? Not necessarily the exact number. It's early in the week, but just a range.
You mentioned no buys, so you're going to have a pretty ugly running back room, I think, to still ultimately play Abdullah. To me, I can't imagine thinking of him as anything more than an RB3. There's 32 teams that are going to be playing this week. We got guys like Isaiah Pacheco coming back. You got Jahmyr Gibbs and Dave Montgomery healthy. Like, you got a lot of these key backs who are going to be playing. And Abdullah, to me at least, I feel like you're kind of falling back on probably that receiving work that he saw this past week, 5 catches on 6 targets for 37 yards and a touchdown. That's where I think he's going to maybe be able to make, fantasy managers happy, is in that passing game. But we just don't know, there's so many things going on with the Raiders offense. Gardner Minshew's gone. They're probably going with Aiden O'Connell, who we know is maybe at best a semi-competent quarterback. He's not anyone who's getting anyone excited. This game, I believe, has a spread of like 11 or 12 points in favor of the Chiefs. Negative game script certainly favor Abdullah here when it comes to the passing work and the Raiders playing from behind. But it's tough. The Raiders did not feed their RB2, who surprisingly was Sincere McCormick, just 5 carries, and I think he had like 33 rushing yards. McCormick did nothing. So there is upside for Abdullah from a PPR sense, I think, as far as targets go, but I would keep expectations low with the understanding that, the ceiling could be higher than we expect if the target volume is there like we saw last week.
Yeah, I think we're all hoping for a Christmas miracle like last year when Aiden O'Connell led the team to victory on the wheels of Zamir White, who had, 145-yard rushing game. I don't know if that should be the expectation this year, kids. So hang in there. I saw someone ask me, Mel. I mean, I think Zach is on board with this, right? Starting Pacheco. I mean, where is he at? Like, what kind of options would you need to have ahead of him to not play him?
I think he's still pretty safely in like the mid to high end RB2 range. He's working his way back. Fortunately, the injury that he suffered was not a soft tissue injury. I'd be maybe more concerned if he was coming back from something like that, because we know those can get more easily aggravated. Pacheco's not dealing with that. It was a fractured fibula, correct me if I'm wrong. It was something bone related.
It was a fibula.
So he should be good to go as far as that goes. And his workload that he saw coming back, he's clearly the more efficient, more explosive back. If he's good to go, I think the Chiefs are going to give him as close to a normal workload as we can. I wouldn't let Kareem Hunt completely scare me off of Pacheco. He's a mid to high RB2, I think, against the Raiders defense.
If I have a reservation, it's the time it took like Tony Pollard to get fully healthy, right?
Yeah.
I think his was a tibia, different bone, but same, there's the 2 bones down there. It was the other bone, I think, but and maybe the surgery he had was different, because I think he had the tightrope kind of surgery or whatever to put that back together. But either way, that's like
just put it back together,
that weighs on my mind a little bit, that it took him time to get up to speed, and like it takes everyone time to get up to speed. Hopefully you've got like super fantastic options, but if you don't, I'm with you. I'm not dialing back on Pacheco if I need him at all. Great question here from Edward, because I think, this week, everyone's pretty much set for this week. The idea is to be proactive and think ahead. For me, who can't work the waiver wire in real time because I have too many damn teams and too much damn work. Sorry, Joe. I have to be proactive. I have to think ahead and try and grab guys at the first come, first serve, but well in advance. But this is something you should be thinking about, Edward. So that's a great job by you working a week ahead of the waiver wire, just to make sure. In week 14, 6 teams on bye. Some of them are very good, I'm told. And that won't be great. It's going to be a tough week for all of us. So let's jump into the quarterbacks here. Start there, Zach. In case everyone doesn't know, by the way, if you're just coming in here, hi, I'm Bob. He's Zach. His work from Roto World. Zachary Kruger, great work there at Roto World, including the running back report. I'm Bob Harris. You can catch me on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 10 p.m. to midnight. Saturdays, 8 to 11 on NFL Radio and the Fantasy Channel. Sundays, 11 to 1 p.m. on the pregame show with Jeff Mance. Also, every morning, listen to the daily update podcast here at Football Guys on the Audible channel. Give you a little 10-minute, just a little bit of news to set the day, get things rolling, put some things on your radar that you need to know about. So check all that out. The free agents we're going to start with here come from Sigmund Bloom's article. It is free on the site. You should go read it. It's got all his commentary on all these players, but we're going to kick them around right now. And this is the quarterbacks Bloom likes this week, and as well as the amounts he's willing to bid on them. Russell Wilson, Drake May, and Jameis Winston. I want to start with Jameis Winston. Like last week, didn't quite get the volume, but prior to last week, he was over 40 attempts a week. How do you feel about him in this offense with the receiving options he has? So keep in mind Cedric Tillman in the concussion protocol, but it's a Monday night kickoff, but also it's against the Denver Broncos. What are we doing?
Yeah, so it's as you said, it's against the Denver Broncos. It's a tough matchup. Another thing, I not that I've looked at this yet, but I always am wary of weather in Cleveland or Denver this time of year. It's in Denver, so weather is something I'd be looking at with this one as well. But to your point, Jameis Winston, 40 plus pass attempts in 3 straight games prior to that Week 12 game against the Steelers. Let's be real, we know why that was. They were playing in a blizzard, Bob. Not ideal weather for airing it out. And the Browns simply didn't, and they were never trailing by so much that they needed to kind of divert from the optimal game plan in a game that had those kind of conditions, and so they didn't do it. They ran the ball a little bit more than what we'd seen with Winston in weeks prior, and we're still able to come out on top of this one. I would say that if there's one reason outside of the whole weather thing, assuming everything's fine there, that we can kind of bank on maybe Winston reverting back to these 40 pass attempts, it's just the fact that Nick Chubb has, all things considered, not been great this year. His first few games out, 22 rushing yards, 52, 39, 50, and 59. Hasn't even cracked 60 rush yards in a game yet this season. Only one game has he had yards per carry over 4. He's just not himself.
Right.
I think the combination of age plus the injury that he's coming back from.
O-line is not as good as it's been in the past either.
No, then that's another big factor. It's just not an ideal situation overall for the Broncos or the Browns in their running game. So I do like Winston to come back and maybe kind of drop back another 40 times and air it out a little bit if they can. I think that's what offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey would like to do. We've seen him lead aggressive offenses in the past when he was with the Bills before he was dismissed. And right out of the gate, once he took over that job, I think it was in Week 8 against the Ravens, the Browns immediately start dropping back and chucking the ball around the field with Jameis. Yep. So I think that's kind of the preferred style of play. I like him in a pinch if you do need a guy. Obviously, you're going to be worried about the interceptions. You're going to be worried about the sacks with Jameis, but he seems to have played a pretty good controlled amount of, or a pretty controlled style of football so far this year. You're never going to be mad if he's racking up the pass attempts. So I do like him to do that if you are looking for kind of a streaming option, is maybe like a mid QB2 who could maybe have more upside than what you're expecting in this game.
I think sometimes with these players, we think like, wow, he's got a lot of good weapons. I want to play the quarterback. In this case, I kind of want to play the weapons. They've been really good. Jerry Jeudy's really come on. Elijah Moore's been getting a ton of targets. And Cedric Tillman, like the last couple of weeks have not been as great, but I don't think the last 2 are indicative of where he's at. I think the first couple of games, maybe not that 20-point a game, weekly average, but that's within him. I think somewhere in the middle of what we've seen the last couple of weeks in those first 2 starts are within the likely range of likely outcomes. Drake May, he can run. Is that the primary appeal here?
It's certainly not a detractor. You like the fact that he can run because he doesn't have the offensive weapons to really do a whole lot in the passing game. May is a guy who we knew he had that mobility coming in. I think some people comped him to like Josh Allen, which always seemed a little bit too generous to me. Josh Allen's a different beast, but he's been able to put up some yards on the ground. He even had a 95-yard game back in Week 9 against the Titans. So he can do work on the ground, and that's always going to be enticing. He gets a generous matchup against the Colts defense, and they're at home in this one. The Patriots are. So I like that as well. The combination of the running and the generous defensive matchup, I think, is a plus sign for him. And I think he's played a higher level of ball than most people expected out of the gate. Drake May was one of the few 3-year prospects in this year's draft class who were going in the first round. I think it was only him and J.J. McCarthy, if I'm pulling those names correctly. I know Penix was like 6 years, Nix was 6 years.
Right.
Daniels was 5. So May was one of the young guys who kind of got typecast as being the guy who maybe needed to sit for longer than these other guys and get developed. And he did, sit behind Brissett early on, but he came out, and now you've got like local media praising him for his ability to break down coverages, to really go through his reads and progressions, know when to bail from the pocket, know how to use his feet and take off running. He's displayed a lot more upside now than what I think we expected heading into this season. And just speaking long term, I think the sky is the limit once they can get some real weapons and an offensive line around them. But
again, Slade's pointing to that offensive line is a wreck.
Yeah, but the legs are going to be good for most weeks, I think. And if that's something that can bail you out of a tough quarterback week for some reason, I don't dislike May against the Colts team either.
right. That's a pretty reasonable matchup. But by the way, I see your comments out there. I'm marking them. We'll get to, if you're asking about wide receivers, I'll get to them when we get to wide receivers, et cetera, et cetera. So hang in there. And Russell Wilson, like, I think like I'm not in a lot of leagues where he's probably available, but if he was, I mean, I think like, I don't know that I want to start him, but I don't know that I want him starting against me either.
No, yeah, I think Russ is kind of falling into that real hit or miss category. I had to watch a game of his a couple weeks ago. I think it was against the Commanders, but in the games leading up to that, he had faced the Jets and the Giants. And I'm sorry, it was actually the game against the Ravens I had to watch. But in the game against the Commanders, the Giants, and the Jets, one of the things that Russ was getting away with a lot was maybe not necessarily high completion percentages, but he had that signature deep ball that was just working wonders with George Pickens. And then he finally ran into a defense that has actually struggled this year as far as passing goes, but they were able to kind of lock down that deep ball aspect of Russ's game against the Ravens. He had 205 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception. The interception he threw was a brutal one in the end zone, down near, not far from the goal line. And to me, Russ is very much just like that feast or famine type of player. Even last week against the Browns, 270 yards and 1 touchdown. That's not going to probably win you your fantasy week most weeks, but it's also not going to lose it. I think in a game like this against the Bengals, maybe if the Bengals are able to get the score up high on the Steelers, it's going to create an environment where the Steelers are going to have to divert from the run-heavy approach that they usually take. But we know that they've been using that a lot lately. Both Najee Harris and Jalen Warren are seeing double-digit touches per game in these last few weeks with Russ under center, and we know that's going to continue as long as the Steelers can afford to do it. So if they're point chasing, I could see there being a case where Russ is, forced to throw more, maybe a few more of those deep balls break the right way, and he's able to have a solid week. But there is that chance that if the deep ball is not working for him, if the Steelers don't need to force it down the field too much, that it's just kind of another dud week like we've seen the last 2 weeks where you really didn't want to have him in your fantasy lineup, even in the worst, situations.
Is it fair to argue it would be similar to like if Anthony Richardson was available on your waiver wire? I might grab him up if I have room on my roster just so I don't have to face the 25-point weeks, even if they're few and far between, right? Like,
right.
By the way, he's not available in any leagues I'm in, people. I'm holding on to him. I'm serving my penance, promoting him heavily all year. I'm not gonna dial back, but I'm not starting him every week. And but that kind of a huge upside play, especially as we head into the playoffs. Should guys like that be available on the waiver wire if you have room on your roster?
If you have him on your roster, why not? Especially if you see that need of, we're far enough in the fantasy season now where we kind of know who the contenders are. So maybe take a look at your rosters. If you're in a 12-team league, it's probably 6 guys going to the playoffs. Maybe take a look and just see kind of what they have going on as far as their quarterback situation goes. If one of those teams making the playoffs has George Pickens, maybe you don't want to get burnt by someone stacking that in any given week. If you have room to stash them, you can do that too. So this is definitely the point of the fantasy season where we're playing a little bit more chess than maybe the checkers we were playing early on. Right now, to get to the playoffs, it's definitely more roster optimization, making sure that you have those high upside players stashed in the event of an injury or something like that. But yeah, if you're a playoff team and you don't want to have to maybe get burnt by a Russ week, if you're not starting him, certainly, if you can reasonably stash him, why not do it? Make sure that your opponents aren't using him to beat you either.
Talking to Zachary Kruger from Roto World. You can follow him on the X at ZK_FFB and at Blueski, where you'll find me at Football Diehards. You'll find him at just ZKFFB, right? No underscore. Just search for his name, Zachary Kruger. He'll come right up, and you'll find a lot of input there on that platform from him. Let's look at the running backs this week, and these are blooms, and we're going to hit on some more in a minute here, people. But and we'll get to some of your questions right now on these. But I think like in these cases, there's a couple of guys here that strike me. Well, I guess it's 2 that strike me as guys that if I was in a horrible pinch, I could probably play right now, like Tyler Algier and Roschon Johnson seem like guys I could play if I had to. And I say that because in Roschon Johnson's case, I've had to, had some serious attrition in some leagues, and he seems to be getting enough touches, and it's kind of carried over to with Thomas Brown as the coordinator, correct?
Yeah, it's carried over. Now, I don't think it carried over. Correct me if I'm wrong. I remember I wrote about him. And
it was not as great this week. It was not as great this week. It was, the running back, the share of touches was better for Swift this week, but the snap count wasn't as high for Swift. He wasn't on the field as much. Roschon was on the field more.
Yeah. And I think that may have somewhat to do with his pass catching ability. Certainly, Swift has gotten in the passing game as well, but I don't think the Bears have fully made up their mind completely who they like in the passing game here, even though it's still the numbers still heavily skew in Swift's favor, if I remember correctly. But the big thing with Johnson right now, I would say, is the goal line package that has been very good for fantasy managers, if that's something that they're doing. But he to me is kind of like 2023 Gus Edwards. I might have even written about it the other day. If you remember Gus Edwards in 2023, I believe he finished the year with 13 rushing touchdowns,
Yep.
Which at one point in time was like tops in the league. I don't think he ended up leading the league in rush touchdowns that year, but it was up there. And the problem with Gus Edwards was you knew he was going to see a decent amount of touches, usually close to double digits. Now, it did tear off towards the end of the season, but when he was doing his thing, it was double-digit touches, 50, 60 yards, but he doesn't catch passes. And without that punch into the end zone, Gus Edwards is giving you a completely useless fantasy week. Roschon Johnson's kind of a lot of the same thing. Just looking at his rushing yard totals here, he hasn't topped out at more than 33 rushing yards in a single game. Even receiving yards, he hasn't had more than 13 in a game. So he's not giving you a lot of yardage, but
counting on the touchdown.
Yeah, he's got
right
touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. I think if I remember correctly, maybe all but 1 or 1 yard touchdowns. Like it's a legitimate goal line roll, and that's about it. So if you're really desperate, go for it. But it was kind of disappointing to see the way that he went for 10 carries in week 11 under a new offensive coordinator. I was kind of excited for maybe a little bit more of a split backfield. Thought there was some signal there. Now week 12 kind of acting like it's just noise. Only 2 carries last week, so we got to wait and see what they're going to do.
That first game, they were a little run heavier. It was almost like they were trying to take some heat off Caleb Williams, and they've done great things. They're getting the ball out of his hands more quickly. Had been snacked so many times. It was like closing in on 40. So, I mean, I think they've done a lot of good things, and I think it's helped the wide receivers there. I don't know that it's going to help Roschon Johnson much. Tyler Algier, I was writing about Bijan Robinson a couple of weeks ago, and I was super impressed with the volume he was getting. He's on track for a ton of touches. What is that leaving for Tyler Algier, and how comfortable are you playing him any given week unless there's something happens to Bijan Robinson?
I'm not comfortable, Bob. Sadly, I wish I was, because I believe in Tyler Algier, the talent. But let me just go over real quick for you his opportunities. Just I'll go real quick. All 11 weeks here. You got 3, 10, 7, 10, 9, 19, just an insane week for him. Then 6, 12, 6, 11, and 1. That there's very inconsistent usage with Tyler Algier, and if the name of the game is playing that volume with your running back, who's the backup to a stud, which in this case Algier is to Bijan, you've now got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You got 6 games on his ledger where he had less than 10 touches, and of those games, you have another like 4 where it was 6 touches or less. That's tough for fantasy purposes. Like I said, talent-wise, I believe in Algier. I think that he could probably be a very solid, starting back, or at least more of a split backfield kind of guy on a lot of teams. But the usage is just so inconsistent. He had only 1 opportunity in last week's game in week 11 against the Broncos. I think we could safely expect more than 1 opportunity per game. But again, three opportunities in week 1, 6 opportunities in week 9. It's kind of dicey out there for Algier. If you're going to start him, I would say do so knowing the risk, but you also facing a Chargers defense, which we know is pretty tough, just as an overall unit. So there's a couple of reasons that I'd be fading Algier. If not for the opportunities, then the matchup itself makes it tough. The two mixed together could make for a really tough outing, I think.
Ray Davis is on Bloom's list, and I feel like, he's had a game as a kind of a standalone component. Braylon Allen at times gets enough work to be a standalone component. So we got a question from Ishmael here. Would you pick up, if you don't have their starters, any of these guys, Braylon Allen, Blake Corum, or Ray Davis, it's a half-point PPR. These all seem like mostly contingent upside guys to me, which, like, there's something to be said for that, although I don't know what kind of upside Blake Corum has yet. I don't know if I've seen enough. I think Allen and Davis I've seen enough to think, wow, well, I know Davis I've seen enough to think he has, because we saw a pretty good game of it. But what is the approach when you're trying to determine? Is it as simple as, hey, I need the best offense, or the best, who's stepping into the best role if something were to happen to the starter ahead of him?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, Bob. That's why you've been doing this for so long, and guys like me come along under your wing and get a chance to learn from the best. So the top offenses is something that I'm definitely looking at a lot here when it comes to situations like that. For me, it would be Ray Davis. We saw what he did. He got literally 1 week where James Cook was out. He turned that into 23 opportunities. He rushed for 20 times, 97 yards, and then he had another 55 receiving yards on 3 catches. He's a big play guy. We obviously know the Bills' offense is a big play offense. Another thing that's I always think very interesting when it comes to the Bills' offense and kind of how they do things. Tyler Johnson gets on the field probably more than we would realize as far as snaps are concerned, but he's never on the field to touch the ball. Like literally, it's almost every week you can count on Tyler Johnson to outsnap Ray Davis, maybe even in some weeks outsnap James Cook, but he's always like the third running back in opportunities. So like the Bills know who they want to put the ball in the hands of. And if it's not James Cook, I think you can pretty safely assume it's Ray Davis, just between Ty Johnson's usage and then also what we saw from Ray Davis in week 6. So I like him as a stash. Just for, mentioning it, I would probably have Corum as my number 2 just because of that Rams offense. And Allen I like, but the Jets are a mess right now, and I just don't.
They are.
I can't get too excited there.
Bloom has Ray Davis on his list, 10 to 20% bid if that's what you're looking for, Ismail. Trey Benson, how good is he going to be when he gets a job to himself?
I mean, I liked him a lot coming out of college. If you give me a second here, I'll pull up. There were some pretty fun Trey Benson numbers I had seen when I was just looking at his career profile and kind of crunching some different numbers on prospects. I think he was probably correctly labeled as the RB2 in the class by most people. I think a lot of times it was Jonathan Brooks is the guy that we liked. But Trey Benson coming out of Florida State, I did think was an exciting prospect as well. I thought he had good athletic, metrics. I thought he did a good job of producing in some of the more advanced stats that we look at here. If I pull them up real quickly
here, while you're pulling those up, I'll get this. Welcome to Tootsie Pop, Rachel, the newest Football Guy staffer, one of the new group that's coming in. Congratulations, Rachel. Welcome aboard. Great to have you here. We're going to get you on the hot seat very soon. Super happy to hear that news and happy to have you. And there was another question here while you're bringing that up, Zach, that is, what was it? Can you say, I feel like this is definitely no. Tyler Sperry wants to know, can you play Pacheco and Hunt on the same team right now?
I try to avoid doing that whenever I can. If you want to, let us know who your other running back options are, who you would have to essentially play, Hunt over, because I think Pacheco's kind of guy I would definitely be starting, but Hunt, I'm probably not looking to stack him with Pacheco this week, even though the matchup is kind of interesting with the Raiders. I usually don't try to monopolize my backfield quite like that. Bob, let me tell you real quick.
So let me tell you my thing about Benson, because I'm like a simple man. My needs a few. I see the weight is 215-ish pounds. I see the number after the 4 point is a 3. Boom, I'm in. When I see big and fast, I'm in.
Yes. Yeah. I'm with you. I'm with you there. Some other things on Trey Benson, when I was putting some of these prospect profiles together and just kind of putting my spreadsheets in, Trey Benson in college forced a missed tackle on 39% of his rush attempts per Pro Football Focus. I will tell you that is tied for the highest missed tackles forced rate with Javonte Williams, who we know was good before the devastating knee injury. Bijan Robinson, he seems to be doing okay for himself as a professional running back.
Good contact balance, that kid.
Yes, and this one's a fun one, which also had me high on this guy heading into the draft. Tyrone Tracy, 39% missed tackle force rate on his rush attempts for his college career. Trey Benson, also PFF's elusiveness rating, which I just think you tend to see a lot of good guys with high elusiveness ratings on Pro Football Focus. His elusiveness rating was 168.9, which was the second highest of any running back I have in this spreadsheet, which I have over 220 running backs listed here. His was second highest. And then yards after contact per attempt, almost 4.0, just a little bit south of that. So Benson, like you said, size, speed, prospect right there. And then an ability to create after contact and force players to miss is just insane in college. And the class he is with is very good. So how good is Trey Benson going to be? My answer right now would be very good. We're just waiting for it to happen.
And don't underestimate, look at what we've seen from James Conner James Conner since his time at Arizona, but focus on what we've seen under Drew Petzing, who's likely to continue on as the offensive coordinator there. And it feels even a little better to me. So a lot to like there. I don't know, how do we feel about Jalen Wright just in general? How do we feel about any Miami running back not named Devon Achane right now.
I don't love it, but I will say that I do think it's pretty clearly right at this point in time.
I think so too.
When I was writing up the Dolphins backfield report, it really kind of just stood out to me that Raheem Mostert against the Rams a few weeks ago, no rush attempts, 2 receptions. Against the Raiders, 3 rush attempts, -2 yards. That's not good. And then this past week against the Patriots, just 2 carries and 1 reception. So over the last 3 games Raheem Mostert has played in, he's averaging exactly 3 touches per game. And Jalen Wright, I don't have his numbers in front of me, but I know it's more than that. The Dolphins seem to have kind of moved on to him as their RB2 behind Achane. Now it's just a question of whether or not he can actually produce with the role that's being given to him, because that still is not quite there. 7 carries for 28 yards last week against the Patriots. But then you have like 5 carries for 4 yards, 5 carries for 3 yards. He's basically doing the Raheem Mostert production, but having more opportunities
right.
to
that's true.
So, but no, I like Wright. I like him as a prospect. I like him in this Miami offense. If something were to ever happen to Achane, they have made the shift. I think it's pretty clear. So he is the back to own. I think Mostert's pretty close to droppable at this point in time. If you have
Griffin MPC has an issue with Brian Robinson Jr. has the ankle problem. We'll see if he plays. Austin Eckler's going to be out. We're going to talk about Jeremy McNichols. He's in our list of other players we'll kind of get to at the end here in final cleanup. But if he wants to bid on McNichols, and I think it's a pretty good idea, he has to drop 1 and 3. Deontay, this is it seems like the easiest question of them all. Corum, Brooks, Chris Brooks, somewhere out there. Matt Waldman's ears just perked up. Loves him from Chris Brooks, Davis, Algier, or Bigsby, who he's I don't know if he's a 1A, but he's a 1B at the very least in a lousy offense. What are you doing to that? Which of those are you most eager to drop?
So for me, it's dependent on need here. I have stashed Blake Corum in some leagues all season long, just because I keep on telling myself if Kyron goes down, he's probably going to be the guy, whether or not he's getting that playing time. Oh, you have to drop 3 of them. All right. Well, I mean,
Deontay for sure, right? He's an emergency player for his NFL team, or an insurance policy, I think, which is fine. I think it's a smart move by them, but it's not good for us. I mean, that's an easy call there. And for me, I mean, Brooks probably, and
Jonathan Brooks, I'm assuming.
I was thinking Chris Brooks.
Oh. If he's stashing Chris Brooks,
it's Jonathan,
I have questions,
right? I guess I would man. That's a tough 3. That's a tough 3 at MPC there, Griffin. I don't know, man.
I would drop Deontay. I think you're right. I think this past game last night against Chargers, I think he only ran 4 routes. I really do think he's kind of the insurance option, which is insane because I do think Deontay Johnson's a pretty good receiver. I'd also drop
great receiver.
Yeah, I'd drop Tank Bigsby. The 50-50 split we saw early in the season has not been there for him the last few weeks. I know he's also dealing with some injuries, and I'm just reading the comment, which is why I'm now being held up here. This guy's got the predicament of all predicaments. But I would drop Bigsby, I would drop Deontay, and then in this case I might actually drop Corum as my other one. I guess you could do Brooks if you wanted to. If you want to hold him as your handcuff to your Chuba Hubbard, then I think Corum's kind of the next one to drop there. So I'll assume you want to hold Brooks for that reason, have the safety net. I dropped Corum, Deontay Johnson, and now I forget who I just said here. Who was the other guy?
It was Bigsby.
And Bigsby, yeah, Bigsby I'd be out on.
All right, it's a horrible offense in Jacksonville. I'm sad to say it. But we're heading into week 14. I might need a playable piece, and Bigsby would be that. So, I'm torn on all these guys. I think if you're at the point where you need a starting lineup and you have to drop 3 of those guys, I'm fine dropping guys like Corum and Brooks and guys that I've been holding on to. We're at that point where it's it's time, right, to start dialing it in. And as hard as it is, and I'm as horrible as anybody, or maybe even more horrible as anybody, of not wanting to let go of a single effing thing.
I'm telling you, I have nightmares about dropping Blake Corum and then needing him 8 hours later.
I'm not a
and
hoarder
knowing I can't
life.
put in a claim.
I'm not a hoarder in real life, but in fantasy, I am the worst of hoarders.
Yes.
Let's look at the wide receivers here. This is Bloom's list. We'll get to some more here, people. We got some others, and I see your questions out there. We'll get to those. Calvin Austin III, 10 to 20%. Demario Douglas, 10 to 20. Devon Vele, I know we have a question about him, 10 to 20. Noah Brown, 7 to 15. Of those guys, who are your favorites?
From a volume perspective, I think Noah Brown is actually interesting. From a production on the field perspective, there is some calls for concern. The Commanders' offense is in a little bit of a funk, but Noah Brown is coming off a week where he actually out-targeted Terry McLaurin. Now, a lot of noise has been made of that in D.C. I can say that as someone who is near the area, so there could be a squeaky wheel game where McLaurin just naturally gets the volume, but just looking at the last couple of weeks, Noah Brown, 9 targets this past week against the Cowboys, 4 against the Eagles. We'll throw that one out. 6 against the Steelers, 6 against the Giants, 6 against the Bears. These were all in back-to-back weeks. So 3 straight weeks of 6+ targets, a 4-target game against the Eagles, and 9 targets against the Cowboys. He's utilized, downfield. It doesn't always work out for him, but he's got an ADOT of over 12 downfield right now. He also draws a lot of DPIs, which is something they kind of, hype up a lot here too. So not that that's getting you fantasy points, but because they know he can do this, it's also kind of enticing the team to throw downfield to him. And whether it's a penalty or he catches it, that they're giving him opportunities to kind of make plays. So I do think Noah Brown is interesting. Demario Douglas is kind of just the classic PPR scam guy. I'm never going to tell you, don't do that. As a Josh Downs truther, I can't say no to PPR scams because I get him all the time.
Because you're an instigator.
Yes, because I'm an instigator. Demario Douglas is another one who I love for the same reason. So I would say, and I'd actually probably say I like Douglas more than Brown just because his involvement in the offense, he probably is their best receiver. But I do like Brown as another kind of wide receiver 4 option if things are looking a little thin for you.
So the question then is, why isn't Vele the priority guy on this list? Why is he not? Explain to me, Zach Kruger from Roto World.
Well, I'll tell you
at ZK_FFB and Blue Sky. I'm sorry, I keep doing
Blue
that.
Sky, Blue Sky. It's all the same. I mean, Vele has been solid. 6 catches for 80 yards in this game against the Raiders. 4 for 66 the week before that against the Falcons. He's been reliable. To me, Noah Brown is not the wide receiver 1 in Washington, but you can see a scenario, as I just pointed out, where he is getting, more volume than maybe we've expected. As far as the Patriots go with Demario Douglas, he's another guy who is also probably the wide receiver 1 in that offense, being funneled a lot of easy targets, being funneled a lot of easy volume. Vele benefits from being a slot wide receiver as well. Almost 72% of his snaps have come from the slot. But Courtland Sutton has been very solid for the Broncos these last few weeks. Just pulling up his numbers real quick.
Super high end.
Yes, I know he had 2 touchdowns last week because he saved my bacon in the Scott Fish Bowl playoffs. Shout out Mr. Scott Fish in the playoffs. But the last few weeks, forget the last few weeks, the last 5 weeks, Courtland Sutton either gets you 100 yards or he gets you a touchdown, or in the case of week 12, he gets you 97 yards and 2 touchdowns. He has 3 double-digit targets over those last 5 games, and those other 2 games it was 9 and 8. So he is the guy, and I just think Vele is kind of like that the what's the word I'm looking for here? Not a desperation play, but you can see where the ceiling is solid, but the floor could also be incredibly limited on any given week.
Week 14 is coming. And I do like just going circle back around. I think he could totally be. I think Tank Bigsby at worst is the 1B. I just think it's a horrible offense. Is one of my issues with that. But look again, week 14 is coming, people. And if you're going to have a guy who maybe in a starting lineup or is certainly half the tandem, I think that's fair. How do you feel about Rome Odunze right now?
I like him more than I did early on. I think he's, if I'm not mistaken, coming off back-to-back 10-target games.
He is.
Is he not?
He is.
This is 2 games with offensive coordinator Thomas Brown, 2 games where you have Odunze getting 10 targets. The production wasn't great last week against the Vikings, only 39 yards. Yeah, the week before, 6 catches, 65 yards on 10 targets. That's nice. And again, it's under a new offensive coordinator, so we got 2 weeks of a new guy doing new things, and this rookie wide receiver suddenly seeing a little bit more consistent involvement. So I like Adunze. I also like him against the Lions on Thanksgiving, and I like the rate at which we've seen the Bears drop back over the last 2 weeks as well. They've seemingly aired it out a little bit more, and I'm into him. The Lions' run defense is kind of solid, but they are a pass funnel on defense as well. So I like Adunze as like maybe like a wide receiver 3 who could have a lot more upside than that.
I feel like there's a joke in this question. Is Quentin Johnson a drop? Yes.
If you have London, Tyreek,
if you don't drop him, he'll drop himself. I can assure you.
Quentin Johnson has definitely accidentally dropped himself in the fantasy league.
Catching is not his strong suit. So if I have these other, so you have Herbert and Johnson gave me, right, there you go. I mean, you have good pieces. If he's never going to be in your starting lineup, I think we're at the point where we can say, and he should not be in your starting lineup, we could say we can move on safely. He's out there, and like it's hard to ignore Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. 6 touchdowns in the last 7 games, solid target shares. Is he a real thing or not?
Well, if there's one thing that I think we know, as much as it sounds like this basic knowledge slaps us in the face whenever we say it, we know that touchdowns aren't necessarily a sticky stat.
True.
Which was kind of my point earlier with Gus Edwards and then comping Roschon Johnson to him. If you're banking on him with the logic being he just keeps scoring, what's it going to look like when he's not scoring? Because you're going to want to know that as well. As far as let me pull this up real quick, because I mentioned my expected fantasy points article. Let me tell you how the expected fantasy points works, because I think actually Ikhine is a great example for this. So just pulling it up here real quick, if you take a look at him over the last, what would it be, like 4 weeks maybe or so, Bob?
Yep.
We're on week 12.
Touchdown every week for what, 6 of the last 7, right?
Yeah, it's been something crazy like that. If we look at their expected points total, Jamar Chase since week 9 leads all wide receivers with 76.6 expected fantasy points in PPR leagues. Now, if you go all the way down, I have to find Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. He's averaging he's totaled over that same span 31.3 expected fantasy points per game because of the volume basically, not being one that's conducive for a lot of fantasy scoring. That is easily outside the top 24. It might even be outside the top 36. I can't, it's not labeled here in front of me. But what he has done, to your point about scoring, is he's had a lot of fantasy points over expected. He is actually 5th amongst wide receivers since week 9 there. That's where you get your touchdown. So you're banking on the one thing that is arguably the toughest to do, which is get in the end zone and score a touchdown. Now he gets a Commanders defense this week, which is nice. I think you could take him seriously from that perspective and from also the fact that he is definitely the wide receiver 2 in the offense. But we know that the Titans offense isn't great. We know that he's kind of doing more getting away with it than he is out there beating the brakes off of defenses and being the stud wide receiver on a week-to-week basis.
JJ Zacharyson had some revelatory numbers. He's averaging a touchdown every 5 targets. The average league-wide is 1 in 20 targets. Yeah. So this exactly. We call this an outlier performance, but it's a series of them. So like I get the whole desire to play him for sure. We got a couple other wide receiver questions here we'll get to before we get to our tight ends. Do we have any expectations for Jalen McMillan?
I don't. I did early on. The Buccaneers, we know, have Mike Evans back. We know that Kate Otten has emerged. And then on top of that, they have 2 running backs who both catch passes, and Rashad White and even Bucky Irving. So and there's some stuff.
Mike Williams,
like not running the right routes or something like that. Mike Williams, I would definitely drop it. I will keep McMillan over Mike Williams. I don't think Mike Williams is going to offer too much at this point in time.
All right, running back question. We're going to talk about him and our other players, but Kamani Vidal, is he worth a stash or stream a defense? I'm streaming a defense if I get stash Vidal, not knowing what's going on with Dobbins.
So wait, the question is, do I stash Vidal or stream a defense?
Or streaming defense. I think like if he stashes Vidal, he has to stream a defense.
Okay. I mean, I guess it depends on who you have out there. I am more of a running backs guy. Like if you can get a different defense out there every week, I personally just like to take those shots on high upside players. Not that I think Vidal is necessarily going to be like a league winner at this point in time. We don't know what Dobbins' injury is. Right, and he didn't get the volume that we wanted. But
I'm such a hater on Vidal.
Yeah, I like him, but
Did we lose me or Zach? See if Zach comes on back here. I think we might have lost Zach. Or did we lose me? Tell me in the chat who's still there. Okay. I'm still here. So we lost Zach. So we'll hold on and hopefully he can reconnect. Oh, maybe he'll get back in. Hold on a second. All right. Zach is gone, so we will forge on out. We'll try to get him to jump back in. We just got a few minutes left, so hopefully he can get in before we get out because great info from him. Let's talk about the tight ends here. Bloom's tight ends. Zach Ertz, bid of 10 to 20%. Cole Kmet, 5 to 10%. I think those are again, these are more plays to me for week 14. And they had that really super pertinent question. This is a smoother week. The trickiness this week is the schedule. We're coming up with, we got to navigate, who are we playing Thursday and Friday versus who's available. Who was that? Who were we talking about? Dempsey and I were talking about someone last night playing in the Sunday night game. And if you had an issue having to wait, do you play someone early and miss out? But so week 14, though, you've got 6 teams on bye and it's going to be miserable. I mean, they're pretty good teams. And no one that looking at the whole list there, who is it? It's Denver, Indianapolis, New England, Washington, Baltimore, and Houston. So there's going to be a lot of good players out that week. So I'm playing a little bit more ahead. Don't know if any of those tight ends help me out there, but let's jump into my other players because I think there's some good names on here that we've been talking about, and we'll get to your questions before we close it out tonight. And if Zach makes it back, we'll get back. So Will Levis been playing reasonably well, throwing a touchdown pass to Nick Westbrook-Akine almost every week. Aiden O'Connell, not desirable. Drew Lock. So Tommy DeVito, if you're not hearing, did not practice or he's limited today, but it sounds pretty bleak for him. Look at who's back.
That was
there. He is.
Can you hear me okay?
Got you now, Zach. No worries.
Okay,
my computer does this all the time.
Yeah, my computer apparently had a lot going on and it just wasn't charging the way it needed to be. So it cut me off mid sentence.
All right, so I'm looking at some of this list of players. I was just saying Tommy DeVito looks like he may not play. I mean, none of these are desirable plays any given week. But heading to week 14, if you were in a serious bye and you were playing proactively, is Will Levis the only name on this list worthwhile on our others list?
May I ask who the Titans get in week 14 just off?
I do have that in front of me right now. They're playing the Jacksonville Jaguars.
I mean, yeah, that's a pretty nice matchup. I feel like it. Correct me if I'm wrong. The Jaguars are another one of those defenses where it's the run defense is okay. The pass defense can be gotten by just about anybody. That was one of Caleb Williams' breakout games, if I remember correctly, earlier this year. Maybe in London, was it? Am I making all this up right now, Bob Harris?
It's totally true.
Okay, yeah. Well, you don't like Kamani Vidal. Let me tell you, I don't like Will Levis. But against the Jaguars pass defense, it's hard to not like too many quarterbacks. So if there is a guy who you need there, Levis has all the things that you want almost from a fantasy football perspective. He's not going to be long for the NFL, I don't think, as a franchise quarterback. But if you want a guy who can air it out, if you want a guy who can hook up with his receivers downfield and at least give them an opportunity to make the big plays, he can do that for you. The week-to-week question is whether or not will he. Against the Jaguars defense in week 14, a proactive approach of seeing that he might do that, of taking a chance on him maybe doing that, I think is, fine if you're really in that big of a pinch.
My guy Tip Major's in the room. Are we Kenneth Gainwell? I just can't, right? You're counting on what happened in Los Angeles if you're counting on anything, right? And if you didn't watch the game, what happened in Los Angeles was Saquon Barkley could not be defended, ran rampant, took one down to near the goal line, and then Kenneth Gainwell got it in. That's about all he is, right?
It is. I do think Gainwell is kind of like an interesting stash, maybe heading into the playoffs, just because I don't think it's going to be, Will Shipley if something were to happen to Saquon. But Gainwell does not have any standalone value to me, even in the worst fantasy weeks.
This is true. And he might score a touchdown, I'm told, against the Jaguars, who aren't very good at the football, or at least defending the passes of the football. Going back to the others list, Jeremy McNichols, we talked about a little earlier. Gus Edwards and Vidal, like either or, if you were in a pinch heading into week 14, worthwhile. I don't know if Amir Abdullah is, just because we don't know what the outcomes for some of the other pieces there are. And by the other pieces, I mean Madison, not Zamir White, because we know the outcome there. It's going to be half a yard in a cloud of dust. Antonio Gibson, though, is a name on this list that I think is interesting.
I mean, I guess my question would be why initially, and I say that as an Antonio Gibson fan. But
week 14 is the only reason.
Week 14 is the only reason. I guess as far as that goes, that maybe he has had single-digit touches in his last 6 games. He has not had more than 8 in a game, and that came against week 12. It just came this most recent week against the Dolphins. So week 14, if you do need him, forgive me, Patriots week 14.
That would be Royal Slade probably gonna beat me to it. It's who is it?
I'll never beat anybody to this with my computer trying to with my
they're
computer
on
team.
They're actually one of the teams on bye in week 14.
Don't
no, he's not. Don't play him.
I wouldn't play him. That's a 0. It's probably like starting Kamani Vidal, for being honest.
No, I was starting Kamani Vidal.
Sadly.
Wait, I left somebody off. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, or as we call him here, the great Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Apparently, he figured out how to catch passes. Maybe Christian Watson and Quentin Johnston could start hanging out with him more. How do you feel about him? Like we heard today, Chris Olave's, progressing nicely, but there's no timetable for his return. Is Valdez-Scantling someone that should be rostered and maybe even played in a pinch?
In the most desperate of weeks, I guess you could. We're literally looking at a 2-week stretch here where he's caught a total of 5 passes for just over 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. His air yards per target in these games is just
ridiculous.
It's just the most MVS thing ever. He averaged 28.7 air yards per target against the Falcons and 23.2 air yards per target against the Browns. So the Saints are doing the MVS thing every time they do give him a chance to make a play. If you need him, there's probably worse guys out there. Honestly, I mean, I know this guy sees more targets, to a slight degree, but there's some weeks where MVS, if he's in a starting role, his value might be like Jameson Williams, and you're playing Jameson Williams. So
correct.
So I mean, if you really need someone in week 14 against the Giants, if you want to tell me MVS might be able to score a touchdown, I'm not going to argue with you.
So I think the difference between MVS and the great MVS is the great MVS catches all the passes that come his way. The real MVS does not, and I don't know when the real MVS is coming back. Could be any time. It scares the hell out of me, but
the real MVS does his best Christian Watson impression.
Right, and it's a very good one. Elijah Moore, we talked a little bit about a little bit earlier, who we think is viable. Adonai Mitchell. Sounds like maybe he'll move into the slot for Josh Downs. Would that be appealing to you, as slot man Kruger?
It would be if he sees the role that Downs has seen, which I think is kind of the question. There's been a lot of things as I scroll the news feeds for Roto World blurbs and stuff like that, where it's kind of like coaches are just like, yeah, we like Adonai Mitchell. We just wish he could do the things well that we need him to do well, which isn't always a great endorsement for players on your fantasy team. We know Josh Downs does things well. He's even seen more targets than I think we expected with Anthony Richardson back in the fold. He saw 7 last week against the Lions. He saw 5 the week before against the Jets, and then 10 against Buffalo. But I think that was a Joe Flacco game, if I'm not mistaken. So if Mitchell can see the volume that Downs has in this slot role with Richardson under center, then yeah, I'm definitely in on him for however long Downs may be out. But I don't love the way coaches always kind of talk about we like him. If he could get a couple things right, we'd really be all in on him. So just be wary that you're probably playing with a little bit of fire if you do go the Adonai Mitchell route. But while Downs is out.
Anthony Richardson slander is allowed here. It wasn't earlier in the year, but it is now. Your fair game. Totally fair game. All right, we're going to have to wrap it up here. There was a couple tight ends here on the list that I think are worthwhile. If you're in a pinch, Luke Schoonmaker fared reasonably well. Noah Gray, though, untrustworthy.
I mean, let me just say, Luke Schoonmaker, if I remember correctly, it's like 16 targets over the last 2 weeks, including 10 in the game that Ferguson went down. So you get the volume with him. Noah Gray, I mean, we're talking another guy, low volume, insane touchdown production, may or may not get you there. So 5 targets in week 11, four last week. Now 4 for 66 and 2. That's pretty good regardless. But it probably not this week unless your options are pretty bad. But in a week 14, if you need them, then maybe. I'm so weary. Like to me, Noah Gray is like Isaiah Likely.
Exactly.
He looks really good, and you're excited about him.
Exactly.
And then just when you're finally ready to be in on the party,
Scampers knows the right answer at tight end. It's always Taysom Hill. Everyone knows this. And just like real quickly before we call it off, there was one question about here. Dave Moore worth to pick up while Coker's out. Depends on how long Coker's out. Matt Waldman, though, talked to him Monday on our podcast that I can't say the name of on this program, is someone that Matt Moore is someone that Waldman really likes. So take that to the bank. Also, take this to the bank. Zachary Kruger's great. It was great having you on today, Zach. Everyone go to Roto World on tomorrow for the running backs?
Tomorrow, backfield report will drop sometime
and the
on Monday.
expected points?
Expected points will be on Thursday this week. Usually it's on Friday.
All right, everybody. So thanks for coming on, Zach. Really appreciate it. It was great to get a chance to chat with you. It's been too long. We'll have to do it more often in the future. Everybody go to footballguys.com. It's a great website. All kinds of stuff is there, including my notebook on Thursday, my polarizing players with Gary Davenport on Friday, my in and out. What a disaster last week on Saturday. More disasters to come, though. And also the Daily Update podcast every morning, 5:30 a.m. Will be one coming tomorrow, and we'll have all kinds of cool stuff. That's it for us. Zach, thanks a lot, man. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks a lot, Bob.
Thanks, everyone, for coming. Appreciate y'all. Happy Thanksgiving, too.
It's true.